Hello and welcome to Euphoria. Today I'm going to continue mocking this set, which is set 31097, the Townhouse, Café, Pet Shop and Apartment building. In a previous video I built this set according to the instructions to make these two buildings and the corner garden. And in the first video of this series I looked at the options for converting these buildings into modular buildings sitting on a 32 by 32 base plate. Now there are lots of ways of doing this. I looked at a couple of them in the previous video, and in this video I'm going to look at one or two more options for converting these buildings and come up with an outline design which will be the one that I'll try and develop further into a full design and a build. In the first video of this series, I looked at how I could start turning this into a modular MOC. In that video, I looked at the two main options, which are to turn it into a straight modular with both buildings facing the front and a pavement along one side, or to keep a corner layout, possibly with the garden in the corner, with the pavement running along two sides of the base plate. One of the options I didn't mention in the previous video was to keep the design as a corner modular building, but lose the corner courtyard garden and extend the building, or one of the buildings, into that space. That would give me a bigger footprint for the buildings at the front, and there might still be room to put the courtyard garden, perhaps in a slightly different form, at the back here, behind both of the buildings. That option lets me keep the 16 or 18 wide frontage for the pet shop and apartment building, but it maybe results in a long, thin building at the front here with a large frontage going round the corner. And that is a possibility. It even allows space for the stairs to go to the upper part of the townhouse and still could provide room for the stairs to get to the apartment above the pet shop. There is space at the back for a little courtyard garden, and the footprint of these two buildings is more square or rectangular than the option in the previous video, which might make the construction and layout a bit easier. So that's one additional option that might be worth considering. But of course it does relegate the little courtyard to the back where it's perhaps not so visible. And it still leaves a very thin house here that's only really 8, 9 or 10 studs deep. It also has the additional slight problem, which is that the two modular connection points on this side don't really line up with the building very well. So it is possible to get round that by building maybe a little wall here with the connection point in it, but that seems a bit artificial, and really I would like the building to extend back to encompass this connection point, and in that way it would sit nicely next to a modular building that would go in the next plot to this one. So of course with a corner modular building you've got to bear in mind that there's going to be a building next to this building on the left hand side, and round the corner there's going to be another building on the right hand side. Now you might notice that I already have a pet shop in my Lego city. I've pulled it out of position to demonstrate the layout here, and this building won't be going next to the pet shop in my city, but it does make me wonder whether I actually need another pet shop in my city. So maybe I could turn this into some other type of shop, or it could be a pet grooming shop, or maybe I can just incorporate this into the pet shop and make this into some other kind of building altogether. I would like to keep it as some kind of shop or business, but I definitely want to keep the apartment building as well. And I kind of want to keep the style of this building so that we don't lose the origins of this MOC completely. As for the townhouse, I'm quite happy to keep it as a townhouse, and I actually quite like the pale yellow colour. But as you can see, compared with the modular building on the left, which happens to be a townhouse as well, it's quite small and rather short. So here I've found a way of fitting two buildings on in a corner configuration and still retaining a small courtyard garden in the corner. This building has a frontage of only 14 studs and a depth of 20 studs, which encompasses both of the connection points at the side. The other building, which is also a rectangle, is 18 studs wide at the front and only 12 studs deep. So that's a better frontage onto the street, but it does mean that it doesn't encompass both of the connection points on this side, at this side, if it's only 12 studs deep like that. So I can either put a bit of extra wall here to join onto this connection point, or, as I've shown here, I could build out the building maybe just on the ground floor so that it does encompass this connection point, and that would give me the possibility of having a doorway at the back. There's also room to have a door at the back of this yellow building. There's still room to fit the staircase up the side of this building, which would be the townhouse. And round this side, I've got room to put a staircase up to the apartment at the side of the ground floor building. And then the apartment would sit on the top, kind of about here, and be the full 18 studs wide and 12 studs deep on the upper levels, which would give me quite a lot more room for the rooms and interior details in the apartment. I could have made the apartment building 14 studs deep instead of 12, but then that would mean that this townhouse building would only be 12 studs wide instead of 14 and have a therefore much smaller frontage onto the street. And actually I have another reason, which I'll come on to later, why I'd like to make this building 14 studs wide instead of only 12. So that's definitely a possible solution. It still gives me room for the courtyard garden in the corner. And there are some options with the apartment building and shop here. For example, I could move this staircase onto the outside wall here, where it doesn't really need to have any windows, and that would possibly give me the option to have some windows on this wall here bearing in mind that there also has to be a staircase from the first floor of the apartment up to the second floor somewhere as well. I've also swapped these two ground floor buildings over because looking at the interior of the cafe would probably go better on the ground floor of a modern apartment block than it would in an older building like this townhouse with its exterior details, ornate facade, etc., that I envisage as being an older building. Now, I mentioned that I wanted the townhouse to be 14 studs wide instead of 12, and that's partly because I think it all looks a bit squashed in its current form, but also I don't like the way the columns obscure the windows in the way it's built according to the instructions. I think it needs to be a bit wider on the base plate to give more of a frontage to the building than just 12 studs wide. So what I've done is I've played around with making it 14 studs wide by moving the columns out a little bit so that they're not obscuring the window anymore. And that more or less gives me a nice 14 stud wide facade, including the door as it was before. You can see at the back of this little mock-up here that in the yellow bricks, kind of where I've added the additional 2 studs worth. And I think that's a better basis for the facade of this building. So if I put that in place on this corner, I have to move these bricks out of the way, obviously. Then it's going to go somewhere like this. Which I think looks pretty good. It still gives me room for the corner garden or courtyard on this corner. And what I've done here is have a play around with the dimensions of the apartment building as well. And I've kind of squared it up so that it's now 20 studs along the front of the building, 12 studs along the side. At least it would be if it was kind of rectangular like this. But also I've found room for an extension at the back, which might only be on the ground floor, but it still allows us to encompass the second modular connection point here. The first one should be about here somewhere. And by reducing the depth of the townhouse, it simplifies the footprint of both of these buildings. So the apartment is basically a 20 stud by 12 stud rectangle, and the townhouse is basically a 14 stud by 16 stud rectangle. And that will make it a lot simpler when planning out the bricks and the structure, as well as the floor plan for the upper floors, which now become square or rectangular and much easier to implement. So I think that's pretty much the basic layout of this modular MOC. I quite like the idea of having a modern apartment block, which I'll try and keep as a quite modern looking design, using the design aesthetic from the set, the creator set, in these kind of colourways with the tan walls. Maybe keep these red blinds because they're quite distinctive. And then in the townhouse, I'm going to have a more old-fashioned traditional building. Probably try and keep this light yellow colour, so it will go on top, something like that, with its traditional features. There's still room inside for a staircase, which will allow me to have living space and possibly a small kitchen on the ground floor, and then some bedroom space and a toilet on the upper floor. In the apartment block, I've got quite a large area now for a cafe downstairs, if that's what I do with this. Still got the access from the front up the side of the building into the apartment on the upper levels, and I could possibly use this area at the back here, maybe kind of move this in a bit, for a kitchen and counter area here, serving area for the cafe. If I just remove this prototype build for a minute and rebuild the outline just with bricks, you'll be able to see more clearly the outline of the structure or the layout that I'm proposing. So here I've shown the layout just in bricks to make it clearer. This will be the townhouse with a 14 stud wide front, and it will be 16 studs deep. These are the two modular connection points on this side, with a rear entrance, room for a staircase internally going to the upper floor. This will be the corner courtyard with the seating area, probably the tree. And then on this side will be the apartment building, 20 studs wide and 12 studs deep, with an entrance here with stairs up to the apartment on the upper level. And here can be somewhere along here the entrance to the shop or cafe on the ground floor. The apartment building extends on the ground floor back by 8 studs, so I have an 8 by 10 stud extension on the back, which encompasses the modular connection point on this side as well, and that can be the kitchen and serving area for the restaurant or shop. And there's also room at the back for a rear entrance with just a little bit of paving at the back to get access to both of the rear entrances. So I think that makes sense from a footprint and layout point of view. The buildings will be structurally much simpler if they're on a rectangular footprint. So I think I'll go with that and move on in my next video to the structural design for this modular MOC. Let me know what you think, whether this will work, whether it will keep the flavour and essence of the original buildings. So thanks for watching. Please let me know what you think in the comments below. Like this video if you did like it, and subscribe to this channel to see more videos about Lego buildings and MOCs.